devastating loss for the Democratic Party in the 2024 election, they are hoping for a rebound in 2028. They have quite an extensive field of candidates running, all the way from established politicians, senators, governors, representatives, all the way to media personalities. The top five candidates at this point, before any contests have been held, are Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, media personality Stephen A. Smith, as well as the former Vice President Kamala Harris, hoping once again to be elected president, unsuccessful the first time. This is the national polling average as of right now, right before the first contest. Kamala Harris, the former vice president, stands at a lead of 21% nationally. Gavin Newsom is in second at 16%. Josh Shapiro is in a relatively close third at 11% of the vote, but very close behind him is Stephen A. Smith, who has seen an unexpected surge lately at 10%. Whitmer is at 9. Jon Stewart, another media personality, a former host of The Daily Show, is at 8%. And then we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 6%, and all of the other candidates at 4% or below. This is a truly historic field of candidates. Never before has a race been so divided, such a toss up between so many different candidates. And we have our first poll closings on February 3rd in South Carolina. This will be the first winner of the 2024 primary contest. And we do have a polling average before we get to that. As you can see, this is the national polling average, how it has changed over time. Kamala Harris has been able to regain some ground in these past few weeks after stellar debate performances. She clearly has gotten her game up on that. As you can see, she was once actually behind Josh Shapiro nationally when he surged during the first debates. Gavin Newsom again in second, but Shapiro in a close third. And look at Stephen A. Smith. He has seen an unexpected surge in these recent weeks. And even look at Jon Stewart. Slowly but surely, he has been gaining support over these months. And in our first contest out of South Carolina, we have a massive upset that will be sure to shock the political world. Stephen A. Smith has come out of nowhere to claim South Carolina. 55 delegates at stake. Probably the most crucial primary state of them all being first. Stephen A. Smith of New York wins South Carolina. As you can see, it is an extremely narrow win, but unexpected at that. This was supposed to be a gimme for Kamala Harris. She was supposed to be able to crush the competition in South Carolina. This race already not looking good for the former vice president, as you can see. Harris had a 10% lead in the polling average, but Stephen A. Smith will beat her by a point. It's 23% for Smith, 22% for Harris, gives Smith a one delegate lead over her. Newsom is at 17%. In fourth place is Wes Moore, also like Stephen A. Smith, capitalizing on the African American vote, the heavy African American vote in this state. John Ossoff from neighboring Georgia got fifth with 8%. Josh Shapiro got sixth, much lower than he is nationally with 7%. We have Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, who got 5%. Jon Stewart with a disappointing performance at only 5%. Gretchen Whitmer at 5% as well. And as you can see, Smith has surged into a national spotlight just as you would expect after just this absolutely stunning win. This will sure to be change politics really forever. Stephen A. Smith is just as much of an outsider as you could possibly get. And with no candidates exiting the race from South Carolina, Democrats are in for the long haul. You have Shapiro, Whitmer, Newsom, Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, just to name a few. This will be a contested convention. That's what it's looking like. And we have new polls after South Carolina. And as you can see, Kamala Harris has taken a major hit. This is an extreme disappointment for her campaign. She is only at 16% of the vote, now in a three-way dead tie with Newsom, who stays steady at 16, and Stephen A. Smith, who has surged ahead of Shapiro now, is claiming first place basically. He's tied for first at 16% as well. Josh Shapiro at 12, Whitmer at 8, Stewart at 7, AOC and Ossoff at 5, and all the other candidates below that. And it is now February 5th, and we have the New Hampshire primary, another crucial primary state. And wow, this is sure to be an insane primary. We have another shock victory out of New Hampshire. Jon Stewart, the former host of The Daily Show, the celebrity, will carry New Hampshire, also of New York. Stewart comes from New York, not too far, not too far away. He has a strong progressive activist voice, and he will take New Hampshire. Few saw this coming. There was extreme excitement for Jon Stewart in New Hampshire, that was known, but to see him beat out Harris and Shapiro, that will sure to be a shock. That will sure to be a shock for many. As you can see, he wins 25% of the vote, not such a bad margin over Harris in such a divided race. At 21%, Shapiro also wins 20. Smith wins fourth place. I mean, he was only polling at 1% here a few weeks ago. Clearly, South Carolina has boosted him nationwide. He's at 11% now. Newsom also at 11 when you're round. Chris Murphy of Connecticut wins 6%. He focused heavily in New Hampshire. AOC wins 5%, as well as Whitmer. Pritzker wins 2%. And let's look at the delegate map as of now. Only two states have voted, but Harris does have a lead. She did not win either, but she has finished with strong performances in both, meaning that she does take the lead at 24 delegates, but we're still such a long way to go. You need 1,975 delegates to win on the first ballot. Harris is the leader at only 24. Smith in second, Newsom in third, Stewart in fourth, Shapiro in fifth, Moore in sixth, John Ossoff in seventh. And Stewart is now the one who is surging. Of course, New Hampshire was never going to be Stephen A. Smith territory, and now Jon Stewart has taken a steam again. And we also have sources from inside the Harris campaign that they are just devastated. That it is a depressing campaign right now. After losing both New Hampshire and South Carolina, she was expected to win in both. Now we have major updates regarding candidates and if they are still in the race. We have four candidates total dropping out of the race after New Hampshire. We have John Fetterman, who never gained ground anywhere, heavily rejected, especially in the debates that you could see. The in the multi-candidate debates, John Fetterman was absolutely crushed by the others. Deval Patrick staked his entire campaign in New Hampshire and only got 0.5% of the vote. J.B. Pritzker put too much money into this race. Clearly, his messaging is not resonating. And like Deval Patrick, Chris Murphy staked his entire campaign in New Hampshire. And we have new polls, stunning new polls after New Hampshire and South Carolina that show Stephen A. Smith leading the former Vice President Kamala Harris. That is truly stunning. But look at how close everyone is. Look at that February 1st. Kamala Harris had a huge lead. All the candidates were heavily separated. And now they are all evening up. That is besides Gretchen Whitmer, who is falling. Kamala Harris, as you can see, falling dramatically while Stephen A. Smith is picking up much of her support. You can also see Jon Stewart is surging. Um, and here's the specific numbers here. Smith at 18, Harris 17, Shapiro and Stewart at 16%, Newsom at 15. Out of the top five candidates, only 3% separate the first from the fifth. That is truly astonishing. But Smith now has the lead, but it is within the margin of error, and all the other candidates could win it. It is truly, truly, truly anyone's game now. It is now February 10th, and the Nevada caucuses are taking place. Let's see who will win here. And this is a big one. Gavin Newsom, after disappointing performances in New Hampshire, especially, as well as South Carolina partially, Gavin Newsom storms back to win Nevada. He wins 23% of the vote, and the Harris campaign just becomes more and more devastated as the contests move on. She is clearly not an electable candidate, especially for the general election. She should be winning all these primary states as the former vice president, and she clearly just is not resonating. Newsom wins 23% of the vote. Harris wins 19. Stephen A. Smith with a very strong performance at 18%. Jon Stewart does win fourth and does pick up delegates at 15.6%. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez largely staked her campaign in Nevada, wins a strong 10% of the vote. We'll see if it's enough to carry on. Josh Shapiro wins 8%. Whitmer 5. Jared Polis of Colorado wins 1. Bashir wins half a point. And that means with disappointing performances again, that Andy Bashir and Jared Polis will end their campaigns. And we also have major breaking news. AOC has been very high profile throughout this campaign. It got a lot of attention during the debates, but she has not had many overperformances so far in this race. She is dropping out and endorsing the closest to her in ideology, the next biggest progressive, Jon Stewart. It is now February 27th, and we have the state of Michigan voting. Will they vote for their favorite daughter? Yes, they will. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, will win her home state, a large state, 117 delegates at stake. Whitmer will save her campaign from disappointing performances in Nevada, New Hampshire, South Carolina. She storms back to win her home state. Whitmer, 33%, but it's not too good of a showing. Stephen A. Smith wins 21.6%, turning out those black voters around Detroit. That is clearly his strongest demographic, are those African American voters. They are carrying his campaign right now. And look at that. Kamala Harris, not first, not even second. She places third at 21.5. Newsom wins 8.6%. Stewart wins 8%. Shapiro wins 7. And with that, we do have an updated delegate count here. You can see Harris retains her lead somehow, doesn't or hasn't won a single state, but she's always in the mix. She's always at the top in every one of them, so she does retain her lead. 54 delegates, Smith at 51, Newsom at 38, Whitmer at 34, even though she won her state pretty handily. Stewart at 32, he won a state, but he's in fifth. And then Shapiro at 16, far below where he should be, and Wes Moore of Maryland is at 4. And we do have major breaking news that will change this race. Kamala Harris dropping out. She is in the lead in terms of delegates, but she's dropping out. This makes sense. She is clearly not on track for a good general election performance if she, as the former vice president, who is still incredibly popular, can't even win a single early primary state. Harris is out. Wes Moore, as well as Senator John Ossoff of Georgia, are also dropping out. And we have 5 candidates left in the race. Now it is time for Super Tuesday, and boy, is it competitive. Stephen A. Smith and Gavin Newsom tied at 26%. Clearly, the race has changed dramatically without Harris in the mix. 26% for each. But Jon Stewart in third at 20%, just stunning everybody with his performance so far. He is clearly shaking up the race here. Shapiro close by at 18, and Whitmer pretty far down at 10. It is now March 5th, and it is Super Tuesday. We have primaries across the United States. A third of delegates are about to be awarded across these states. In Alabama, we have our first projection. It is clearly just like the early primary states. Black voters are crucial to Stephen A. Smith's campaign right now. Smith wins Alabama, 52 delegates at stake. He wins 55% of the vote, a resounding victory without Harris in the race. He is on track to do very well in the South. Look at that, 34 delegates to Shapiro's 10. Gavin Newsom, on the other hand, will carry American Samoa, only 6 delegates. He wins all of them. Continuing the trend of the South, Stephen A. Smith wins Arkansas, 31 delegates at stake there. He wins 12 of those 31 delegates. Shapiro wins 10, a pretty close race. Stephen A. Smith only wins by 2%. And in California, Gavin Newsom will win his home state, thankfully for him. A massive state, the most massive state. 424 delegates are up for grabs here, so this is all a delegates game. People expected Gavin Newsom to win, but look at Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart only less than 2 points behind Gavin Newsom in his home state. That should be a worrying sign for the Newsom campaign, and it's great news for the Jon Stewart campaign. That is 147 crucial delegates for Jon Stewart in California, practically tying what Gavin Newsom gets at 149, and much more than what Stephen A. Smith gets at 100. Smith wins 23% of the vote, Stewart 28, 29 when you round, and Newsom at 30. Colorado will go to Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart appears to be doing very well in progressive states, among progressive Democrats. That appears to be his base. It was in the early states, and that trend is continuing. Jon Stewart pulls off a narrow victory here. Gavin Newsom in a close second. Newsom, of course, doing better in these western states that is where his messaging is resonating the most. However, in Iowa, Josh Shapiro will pick up his first state. This is somewhat of a surprise. Gretchen Whitmer campaigned hard here, as well as other Midwestern states, but it will be Josh Shapiro who comes out on top, as you can see. It's a very narrow victory. It's a three-way race, practically. Stewart and Whitmer just about tie, but Josh Shapiro will come out on top by just 1.2% over Stewart. He wins 15 delegates, 29% of the vote. In Maine, another progressive state, Jon Stewart continuing his wins. Nearby New Hampshire, this was somewhat expected, but polling has really failed to pick up on this massive support among the Democratic Party, among Democrats, for Jon Stewart. This is a movement throughout the Democratic Party that was just unforeseen by pollsters and, of course, the Democratic establishment as well. In Maine, it's a 5-point victory for Stewart over Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro, not too far behind at all. In Massachusetts, one of the larger states, Jon Stewart pulls out a razor thin victory over Josh Shapiro. Both campaigned very hard in this state. Stewart wins 31% of the vote, and Josh Shapiro just zero point 0.6 behind him. They both win 36 delegates. Stephen A. Smith down there at 20%. And then we have Minnesota. This was a strong Bernie state in 2016. Jon Stewart will win now. 75 delegates at stake. Jon Stewart wins 23 of them. Shapiro wins 19 of them. Newsom wins 13 of them. Jon Stewart is absolutely impressing everybody, the entire political world, with these Super Tuesday wins on top of Super Tuesday wins on top of Super Tuesday wins. He is just racking up, I should say raking up, that's the expression, these states. In North Carolina, however, another southern state, Stephen A. Smith will come out with the win. You can see he wins 39% of the vote. Shapiro in second at 32%, a strong showing for him, and Gavin Newsom at 18%. Oklahoma, though, in a narrow victory, Josh Shapiro will take Oklahoma, a more rural state he appears to be doing well in. Stewart in a close second. This was, again, a Bernie state. Makes sense for Jon Stewart to do well here. But it's Josh Shapiro who comes out on top with 31% of the vote. Stewart close behind 29%, and Whitmer places third with 16. And in the state of Tennessee, Stephen A. Smith will win. It's a really resounding victory, 46% for Smith, 30% for Shapiro. That's a 16-point win there in Tennessee for Stephen A. Smith. In crucial Texas, a state that virtually every candidate heavily focused on, 244 electoral votes, Stephen A. Smith will win in something of an upset. Many polls, maybe even most polls, had Stephen A. Smith in third behind Shapiro and Newsom. They were supposed to be the top contenders, but it will be Stephen A. Smith who comes out on top. This is an extremely crucial victory to his campaign. Clearly, Smith and Stewart overperforming expectations on Super Tuesday. Sorry, that text says Tennessee. These are the results for Texas. It's 29 to 28 to 27 for Smith, Shapiro, and Newsom, respectively. A very, very tight race there in Texas. In Vermont, however, Jon Stewart wins a resounding victory, wins almost every delegate. In Virginia, Josh Shapiro will win. Not too much of a surprise. This is almost his home turf. He comes right nearby from Pennsylvania. Very popular governor of Pennsylvania. Shapiro wins 34% of the vote. Stewart comes in second at 26, and Smith in third at 19. So Super Tuesday is now completed, and would you look at that interesting map? This will be a tight race until the convention. I mean, look at those top four candidates. Smith, however, comes out on top. This is truly incredible. Nobody could have expected this. The top two finishers after Super Tuesday are both people who have never been elected to public office. Both are media personalities. Stephen A. Smith in first at 425 electoral votes, a hefty lead when you consider everything else. Jon Stewart in second at 367. Newsom in third at 357, not too far behind. Josh Shapiro a little far down at 339. And Gretchen Whitmer not looking too good for her at 73 delegates. And just look at those bar graphs. The percentages up top are how close each candidate is to 1975. That's how many are needed to win 1,975 delegates. Stephen A. Smith is only 22% of the way there, while Stewart is at and Newsom are 18% there. Shapiro at 17, and Whitmer only at 4. But look at that map. Stephen A. Smith doing very well in the South. Jon Stewart doing very well in the former Bernie states, more in the North. Looks like he'll do very good in the Northeast. Particularly, Gavin Newsom, he only won one state on Super Tuesday, but it's a big one. He's doing better in the West, while Josh Shapiro just you know, takes more rural states. It seems on average, all across the country, but throughout the middle. And we have breaking news when it comes to Whitmer. Whitmer will remain in the race, but will not actively campaign in the following primary states. Her name will remain on the ballot. However, she will remain a candidate for the convention. It will be a contested convention. She could emerge in the case of a deadlock as a compromise candidate. That is in the realm of possibility. And now the DNC is starting to get real scared of the possibility of a Stewart or Smith nomination. The DNC has held an emergency meeting trying to stop Stewart and Smith at all costs. And look at this polling average here. First and foremost, an absolute gigantic surge of Jon Stewart. He was way down at around 12%. And now, after Super Tuesday, he has surged to about 22%, exactly tied with Stephen A. Smith. Gavin Newsom has gained some ground, especially with Harris dropping out. Shapiro is also gaining ground, of course. This happens when other candidates drop out. But Whitmer is falling bad. It is now March 12th, and we have polls closing in various states across the nation, as well as territories. The Democrats' a broad primary, typically very progressive. Bernie won it in 2020. Jon Stewart will win there in a landslide, I might note. In Georgia, Stephen A. Smith will come out on top, a very large state at 108 delegates at stake. He beat Shapiro by 9%, a pretty hefty leader, more like 10%. Newsom clocks in at third. And in Hawaii, Jon Stewart will win. And in Mississippi, Stephen A. Smith will come out as the winner, 35 delegates there. Pretty crushing victory, 44% to Shapiro's 29% and Newsom's 17%. In the Northern Mariana Islands, Gavin Newsom will win all 6 delegates. In Washington, West Coast continuing, Gavin Newsom starting to do better than Super Tuesday. He only won one state on Super Tuesday. Now he's starting to pick up some states. 92 delegates from Washington. He wins 33% or 34% of the vote, I should say. Very narrow victory over Jon Stewart. He only beat Stewart by one single delegate. Shapiro wins 23% of the vote. So looking at our updated delegate map, sorry, the map is not updated actually, but the delegates are. Smith still retains his lead at 486, and now Newsom narrowly overtakes Jon Stewart. Newsom is at 440, Stewart at 437, Shapiro at a 401. Smith is now a quarter of the way to the nomination, 25%. It is now March 19th, and we have poll closings in four states, two of them being very, very crucial, Ohio and Illinois. However, in Arizona, not much of a surprise here. Gavin Newsom is the projected winner. Pretty good win. Pretty good win over Jon Stewart, a 10-point lead over Jon Stewart, 32 delegates to Stewart's 20. In Illinois, however, very close three-way race there in Illinois, but Stephen A. Smith will come out on top. Big state, 147 delegates to the convention. And look at that, he beat Shapiro by just 0.3%. It's so close, in fact, that Shapiro wins more delegates. Even Stewart wins more delegates than him because of how they're distributed by congressional district, but still in terms of raw vote, Stephen A. Smith wins by 0.3%. But look at that, between Smith, Shapiro, and Stewart, just zero point 0.6 separates first place from third place. In Kansas, Jon Stewart will win pretty handily. However, in Ohio, the other crucial state of the night, 127 delegates at stake. It is a very, very tight race, and this means that every candidate wins one state on this day. Well, it's actually not that close. Don't know why I said that. But in Ohio, Shapiro wins quite handily, really. In 8-point lead, basically, Shapiro wins 37% of the vote. Stewart in second at 28. Smith not close behind or pretty close behind Stewart at 26. And with our updated map, we see Jon Stewart is at 564 delegates. Look at that. He takes the lead. That's how close it was. He was just in third before whatever day that was. And now he has jumped into first at 564, 3 delegates over Smith, who's at 561. And Shapiro overtakes Newsom. Guys, Newsom was just in second place before today. Now he drops to fourth. That is how razor thin this race is. Shapiro at 538 and Newsom is at 480. Now Stewart is in the lead. He is 29% to 29% of his way there to 1975. Smith is actually tied with him at 19%. And look at that map, that updated map, and Newsom doing better in the West. Shapiro getting you know in the middle of the country. Stephen A. Smith dominating in the South, etc. It is now March 23rd, and we have poll closings in 3 states. In the state of Missouri, Stephen A. Smith is a projected winner. He wins 64 delegates at stake. He wins 20 of them. It's a very tight race over Jon Stewart. Shapiro clocks in at third. It's 31 to 29 to 23. In Louisiana, Stephen A. Smith will also win, looking to be a good night for Stephen A. Smith. 48 delegates at stake. Smith wins 37% of the vote. Shapiro wins 25. Newsom wins 21. Then we have North Dakota, where Jon Stewart is the projected winner by a wide margin, again, doing better in the former Bernie Sanders states. Look at that margin. 56% for Jon Stewart, only 30% for Josh Shapiro, only 7% for Newsom. A crushing victory in these Midwestern states. Stewart retains his lead, but look at that. It's by one single delegate. It's now 600 to 599. Shapiro wins 569. Newsom falling behind now at 500. Look at that map. Such an interesting map. And this is now the new national polling average. For the first time ever, Jon Stewart has pulled ahead of Stephen A. Smith as well as every other candidate. Jon Stewart is ahead by a very narrow margin over Smith. Shapiro is at third, and Newsom has really taken a hit in these past few days. He has been crushed in these recent debates, and his performance so far is not really outstanding. It is now April 2nd, and we have primaries in 4 states. New York is sure to be a crucial one. And in New York, look at that. Jon Stewart wins. This is huge for his campaign. He campaigned hard in New York. Massive number of delegates, 220, are at stake. He wins 84 of them. It's a narrow victory over Stephen A. Smith, but he wins 32.2% of the vote. Smith wins 31. Josh Shapiro wins 27. In Wisconsin, Jon Stewart will also win here. It's 42% for Jon Stewart, 33% for Josh Shapiro. It's a really solid victory, 9-point victory for Stewart in Wisconsin, and 15% for Newsom. In Connecticut, however, Josh Shapiro will win. It breaks Jon Stewart's streak throughout New England, but Josh Shapiro will win 49 delegates at stake. Sorry about the Ohio there. But Josh Shapiro wins narrow victory over Stewart, 36.5 to Stewart's 34.5. However, in Rhode Island, Josh Shapiro will win here as well. And with that being said, Jon Stewart actually expands his lead. And not only that, Shapiro, with good solid performances in New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, has overtaken Stephen A. Smith in a stunning surprise. Stewart expands his lead, though. He's now at 751. Josh Shapiro at 692. Stephen A. Smith at 675. Gavin Newsom again falling behind at 515. Stewart in first is 38% of the way there to 1975. Shapiro's at 35% of the way there. Smith at 34 and Newsom at 25. It is now April 13th, and there are primaries in 3 states, none of them too crucial. In Alaska, Jon Stewart is the projected winner. No surprise here. There's one poll conducted that had him leading by a lot. Wyoming, also another, among the Democrats there, they are very progressive. Economically, at least, they will vote for Jon Stewart as well. And then Pennsylvania, massive state, 146 delegates at stake. Shapiro, as you'd expect, Pennsylvania votes for their favorite son, Josh Shapiro. He wins a crushing 60% of the vote. Jon Stewart clocks in at second, 19%, not even close. Stephen A. Smith wins 14%. So it does get narrower. Stewart is now at a 816. Shapiro is at 778. He keeps gaining more states. It looks like Josh Shapiro, we can officially say, is the establishment's best hope as of now. Smith at 692. Newsom not looking good for his campaign at all. He continues to fall behind. He is now at 519. And we have some breaking news, but it is pretty much expected. Gavin Newsom is officially dropping out with increased pressure from the Democratic National Committee, and he is endorsing Josh Shapiro. That is massive. 500 delegates will be absolutely crucial in a deadlocked convention that could very well may give Josh Shapiro the edge over Smith and Stewart. And Shapiro remains the last hope for the establishment. He is the last establishment choice in the race. And now, what does this become? This becomes a race between the establishment versus the outsiders. The establishment backing Josh Shapiro big time, while Stewart and Smith have actually aligned greatly. They team up in debates, their campaigns coordinate. They are trying to take down the establishment. It is now May 15th, and we have poll closings in 5 states. Candidates heavily focused on the close Indiana primary. Indiana is a state where all 3 of these candidates could win. They found themselves competing, traveling at the same time, speaking at the same events in Indiana. Indiana, just like the old days, decades ago, Indiana was one of the most important primaries. It is returning to its roots right here, and Indiana will go to Josh Shapiro. This is gigantic for his campaign. 67 delegates at stake, and Indiana will vote for Josh Shapiro in a tight race. Clearly, the Stewart and Smith are splitting that anti-establishment vote now, but Shapiro beats out Stewart. 37% for Shapiro, 34% for Stewart, 29% for Stephen A. Smith. In Maryland, Josh Shapiro will win. 81 delegates at stake. No surprise here. Neighbor to Pennsylvania, very popular here as well. He wins 40%. Smith clocks in at a pretty strong 30%, especially with his campaign struggling. Stewart just about ties him. In Puerto Rico, Shapiro will win 51 delegates at stake. He wins most of them. Nebraska, not much of a surprise, will go to Jon Stewart. Not too important. And then West Virginia, by an absolute landslide, the Democrats in West Virginia vote for Jon Stewart in their primary. Look at that margin, 54%. Shapiro clocks in at second at 26. And Whitmer is now reversing her former pledge. She is now dropping out officially, pulls her name from consideration, and endorses Josh Shapiro. There's heavy momentum in the establishment building for Josh Shapiro as their last hope to beat Jon Stewart or Stephen A. Smith. So that leaves 3 left. 1975 to win. Stewart is at 906 delegates, 46% of the way there. Josh Shapiro is at 875, not too far behind, but Stephen A. Smith appears to be slipping just a bit. He's at 749. He's 38% of the way there. And as you can see, we have our updated map. Newsom now out, but look at John Shapiro. Those purple, or John Shapiro. I mean Jon Stewart. He is just sweeping the country from the Northeast and the Midwest. This is an interesting coalition for sure, as well as Josh Shapiro's coalition. That is also interesting as well. And it is now May 21st, and we have primaries in 3 states now. In Idaho, Jon Stewart will cruise to a crushing victory, as well as Oregon. Jon Stewart wins Oregon with 45% of the vote, strong showing. Josh Shapiro wins 35. In Kentucky, however, this is a surprise win. Jon Stewart was supposed to be favored here considering his very strong performance in West Virginia, but it will be Josh Shapiro who wins. He wins 35% of the vote. Jon Stewart wins 33%. Stephen A. Smith does well, 31%. And still, serious trouble for Stephen A. Smith here. He is at a standstill. He is not winning any additional states. He might be getting some delegates, but he is lacking in momentum. Jon Stewart retains his lead. He's at 961, and Josh Shapiro is at 918. Smith is at 772. It is now June 4th. The last batch of primaries is about to be held. This is it before the convention. Who these last primaries will be important, especially Florida and New Jersey, as you can see, the biggest states of them all on this day of these primaries. Kansas focusing heavily on them. In D.C., Josh Beer will win, not much of a surprise. In Delaware, he will also win, home of the former President Joe Biden. who actually endorsed Shapiro recently. New Mexico will also vote for Josh Shapiro. This is somewhat of an upset. Jon Stewart was, just based off of the entire map, was supposed to win in New Mexico, but Shapiro pulls off a win by 3 points, 44-41. Smith wins 14. In South Dakota, however, a landslide victory for Jon Stewart. No surprise there, as well as Montana, 17 delegates at stake. He actually cruises to a crushing victory, the biggest yet seen in this primary, 66% to Shapiro's 33%, Stephen A. Smith only at 5.6%. In Guam, Jon Stewart will win all 6 delegates and the Virgin Islands as well. In Florida, this is a big one. In the state of Florida, massive 224 delegates at stake. Jon Stewart pulls out a narrow victory, somewhat unexpected, but it's not even that close. Jon Stewart wins 45.5% of the vote. Josh Shapiro wins 39.3. The delegates are not right. Um, Lots of delegates going to all the candidates here. Stephen A. Smith wins 15%. In New Jersey, Jon Stewart will win 107 delegates at stake. This is the best day, maybe ever, besides Super Tuesday for the Stewart campaign. He is now the front runner, the official front runner, to be the nominee. This is skyrocketing his chances of winning. The two huge competitive states on this day, on this final batch of primaries, New Jersey and Florida, both go to Jon Stewart. Even New Jersey, neighboring Pennsylvania, neighboring Shapiro's home state, Stewart beat Shapiro 41-40, 44 delegates for Stewart, 43 delegates for Shapiro. So the map is completed. This is the final primary map, and it will be a contested convention as expected. You need 1975 delegates to win. Stewart wins 11, 1,182. Shapiro wins 1,105, not too far behind. And Stephen A. Smith sort of lacked at the end there, wins 831. Jon Stewart has 60% of the delegates needed to win. Josh Shapiro close behind at 56%, and Stephen A. Smith far behind at 42%. And it is now the DNC, and in their hotel suites, Josh Shapiro and Gavin Newsom were seen meeting. Gavin Newsom has not met with Stewart or Smith. This could be crucial in how Gavin Newsom awards his delegates. It is now the DNC. This is the very first ballot. Delegates must vote for who they are pledged for on the first ballot. No, and Newsom has not officially given his delegates to Josh Shapiro. Neither has Whitmer, neither has Harris or Moore. They all have their own delegates. But again, the first ballot, super delegates cannot vote on the first ballot. They can only vote on the subsequent ballots if it is a contested convention. And again, Stewart at 1182, Shapiro at 1105, Smith at 831. So, super delegates can now vote. This is big. The threshold to win the nomination has now gone up, and the second ballot just completed, and Josh Shapiro has surged. 70%, no, 75% about of superdelegates back Josh Shapiro on the second ballot. He has surged, skyrocketed above Jon Stewart at 1,652. Stewart now far below him at 1,298. This race has changed completely. Now, Stephen A. Smith at 912, and now 2,257 delegates are needed, not 1975. Now Josh Shapiro has 70% of the delegates needed to win. This race has changed in an instant. Super delegates have completely changed this race. Shapiro 70% of the way there, Stewart 55, Smith 39. And we have major, major breaking news. Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer both have instructed their delegates to vote for Josh Shapiro. Clearly, a deal is in the works here. This doesn't officially put Gavin Newsom over 2349 by our tally, but he might be unstoppable at this point. Ballot number 3 superdelegates once again voting. And look at that. Josh Shapiro is now 96% of the way there. He has 2,244 delegates. Stewart has 1,298. Smith has only 912. This is not looking good for the Jon Stewart campaign. It might be over. 96% of the way there. This is truly stunning. What can be done to reverse this? This is major breaking news. Stephen A. Smith at the last second is dropping out and endorsing endorsing Jon Stewart, his friend throughout this entire race. They teamed up together in the very beginning of the race. Stephen A. Smith and Josh Shapiro appeared to be very friendly, but as this race turned into establishment versus outsiders, it became a nasty, nasty race, and clearly the personal connection between Smith and Shapiro completely crumbled. In hopes of killing the establishment, Stephen A. Smith is giving all of his delegates to Jon Stewart, and look at this. This might not be over. Look at this map. This is a convention that is for the history books that will be remembered forever. 2,257 delegates needed. Shapiro has 2,244. Stewart 34 behind at 2,210. What does that mean? Nobody reaches there. What does this mean? This race will come down to 58 delegates. Kamala Harris is 54 delegates and Wes Moore's 4 delegates. They both have not released their delegates. This final 2% of the delegates will decide this race. Again, 2257 needed. Both are 99% of the way there. Absolutely stunning. Kamala Harris, as expected, frees her delegates. Wes Moore and Harris are freeing their delegates. Both spoke at the DNC. They say they can vote for whoever. This race may not be over, but they are Harris delegates. They are more delegates. They are likely to vote for Josh Shapiro, and that is right. Josh Shapiro is the Democratic nominee for president. He has been nominated for president. Josh Shapiro is put over the top with the 58 released delegates, 2,290 delegates, 93 more than he needs, 33 more than he needs. Jon Stewart, 2,222. Josh Shapiro, 100% of the way there. Jon Stewart, 99% of the way there. A truly stunning convention here. And this is not looking good for the Democratic Party. The Jon Stewart supporters have stormed out of the DNC. They are quitting. Dem exit. This is very reminiscent of the 2016 Bernie campaign. They are claiming the DNC rigged it for Josh Shapiro. However, Stewart is trying to quell these fears. Jon Stewart addresses DNC, fully endorses Shapiro. Josh Shapiro, the Democratic nominee for president, to face off against J.D. Vance in November.